Welcome back. Is psychic phenomena real? Well, if you know what I do as a psychic, you'll know how I feel about that. But skeptics will point you towards people like Sylvia Browne. Sylvia Browne told Amanda Berry's mother that she was in fact dead. And Amanda's mother, Luana, broke down and was devastated. A year later, she died of heart failure. Now, she may have had heart failure before Amanda's disappearance. I don't know. But as a nurse, which is my day job, I can tell you that deep, traumatic heartbreak can worsen or even create heart failure. Amanda Berry was found alive in the same state her mother had lived in up until about a decade after her mother passed away, unfortunately. And Amanda wasn't the only one that Sylvia was wrong about. So, is there some other way, something other than just having faith that it exists, to point towards whether or not it's real? Welcome to the Occult and the Apocalypse with Kristen, aka Fire Terra Mama, where I tell you how they took what was once widely known about God, spirituality, and yourself, and how they took that and they locked it away. Come with me while I show you what I've learned from science and religion and cultural beliefs and mythology to turn the occult and the apocalypse into just the hidden and the revealed. Well, the United States government studied this extensively. They've studied everything from ESP, which is essentially the clair skills, clairvoyance, clairaudience, and the like, all the way to astral projection, telekinesis, telepathy, and more. In papers released by the CIA in August 2000, there's a summary of a multi-decades-long research into the validity and usefulness of psychic phenomena. During sets of various tests, ranging officially from 1973 to the final analysis in 1988, they found, in reference to remote viewing, that the type of remote viewing directly impacted the results. Within this decades-long study, they also found 6 very gifted individuals that they used more towards the end of the program. One thing that they did determine was that when it came, at least for sure, to remote viewing specifically, it was easier to find people who were naturally talented rather than to try to train people. In the CIA papers on the topic, there includes CIA-RDP-00787R 0005-0038-004-4. Now, interestingly enough, this is not an internal CIA document. It's actually an article from the Princeton Alumni Weekly, or PA, and it was written by Robert G. Jan in 1951. It was called Psychic Process, Energy Transfer, and Things That Go Bump in the Night. Now, this article goes on to discuss remote viewing, psychokinesis, theoretical models of psychic phenomena, and the history of psychic research, the categories of psychic phenomena, as well as the various people that were researching things around the world. In the historical portion, it discusses that humans have been representing the supernatural for 20,000 years. It highlights the power of the Oracle of Delphi, the psychic processes of the Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans. It also lumps the Bible in, stating the Bible is an excellent catalog of psychic phenomena. The section goes right up through the 1900s. Psychic phenomena has been intertwined with human history for all time. Other CIA documents speak of what's called the Gateway Program. These document a series of programs that began as remote viewing but also later evolved to other phenomena. It progressed into the Stargate program and then it seemed to go away. But did it really? Or is it possible that it went public instead? Many people now within the ages of 35 to 50 remember having participated in the Gifted and Talented Educational Program, which was named the GATE program. Now, children with hyperintelligence or evidence of psychic sensitivity and potentially a history of trauma, although that's disputed, were placed in the program for testing and evaluation. Now, it's been postulated that all children have an open connection to these additional senses from birth up until somewhere between the ages of 2 and 5. And that it's just a matter of some people retaining those abilities when others do not. There doesn't seem to be any clear single reason as to why some children do retain it. However, there have been a lot of evidence that there are some theories amongst those in the know that I'll briefly discuss later. But the government seemed to think it was easier to identify the gifted than to create them. And the GATE program in schools across America may have been a tool to do just that. Of course, that's my opinion only. No facts, just a theory. But it's a possibility. It's really only been in recent times where large numbers of adults are connected to and tapping into their intuition and extrasensory gifts. These adults now would have been children then. So with all that said, the papers from the 80s put a lot of research into these phenomena, and like I said before, their usefulness for the government. It's pretty fair to say that psychic abilities in many forms are no longer junk science or just wannabe scammers, but a proven phenomena. Now, whether or not it was inevitably a practical application for the military, now that's another story. So, since the phenomena is legit, why is it considered taboo? And why are some psychics who are either just outright fake or deliver inconsistently correct or incorrect information? Well, that's kind of hard to hash out. We've certainly heard of more seers who are famous for their predictions than not. Seers such as Nostradamus with his cryptic centuries of predictions, some seemingly very clear and others less so. And then there's Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet. He predicted many things, including the Wall Street crash in 1929, World War II, an amazing discovery in Bimini, as well as the deaths of John F. Kennedy and Franklin D. Roosevelt. But he also predicted that the find in Bimini would be Atlantis, and although it seems like a phenomena, I don't think that that's quite it. And then there's Baba Vanga, who predicted that the 44th president of the U.S. would be a black man, and she also saw his successor being very controversial for the United States, and that it would lead to some sort of a culture war. She predicted a few assassinations as well as the timing of her own death. She also made many timed, dated predictions that were nowhere in sight of coming true, including contact with Venetians, And then there was Jane Dixon, who predicted that in 1960 a Democrat would be assassinated or die in office. And she also made accurate predictions, including potentially the AIDS epidemic and an Exxon tanker accident. There's Saint Malachi or Malachi. I never know which one. Who's the prophecy of the popes, although not completely fulfilled, thus far has been accurate. And then there's the psychic that predicted in 2020 there'd be a mysterious pneumonia like respiratory illness that would just show up out of nowhere, spread globally, be difficult to treat, wreak havoc on the world, and then relatively disappear only to show back up again 10 years later before vanishing permanently. Essentially predicting COVID. And that was, you'll never guess, Sylvia Browne. Sometimes the psychic is not wrong. Sometimes the psychic is putting their own ego into the intention behind the prediction, and therefore, maybe they come up a little wrong. Or if they are outwardly wrong, well, there is a practical application for that. At least if you believe in the Akashics and soul contracts. To understand how psychic phenomena works, I have to help you understand a soul contract and what that means in the sense of the current scientific theories about the nature of reality and the possibilities of a multiverse. Now, a predominant spiritual concept is something that's based in kind of like a little bit of Gnosticism, the Abrahamic religions, the Eastern religions, nature-based religions, and that's the concept of the Akashic space and the Akashic records. It's considered the place where our soul originates and where it goes between lives and even during periods of sleep. It's essentially where the spiritual concept of your oversoul or your higher self lives. Our embodied souls return there during times of peace and rest, meditation, and in times of trauma. While in the Akashic space, we are able to connect with the higher selves of ourselves as well as of our soul tribe, who are essentially the people that we plan our life experiences and soul contracts with. Some people are in our lives for short-term or minor lessons, while others have long if-then statements built into them, such as, if I've developed a fear of abandonment and you've developed a fear of attachment, by the time that we meet, then you will do X, Y, and Z for me, and I will do A, B, and C for you. And if we complete these steps, the relationship ends on terms of JKI. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, maybe they go on to a next lesson. A literal choose your own adventure. Now, free will makes that a little bit more difficult because there is some free will involved. But free will is really limited to like 1 to 3 choices for the most part here on Earth. Every choice you make is really some type of if-then statement in your own soul's contract and mission. When looking at it from the perspective of science, it's the science of infinite timelines or universes. The scientific theory that a timeline is created at your birth, but due to many choices, changes, if-then statements built into your life, each time you reach an important point in your timeline, your decision actually, theoretically, branches you off from that timeline. One where you make decision A and therefore taking you away from the original timeline, or one where you make decision B and remain on, or vice versa. There's some degree of debate as to whether or not a version of you remains on your original timeline, but to some degree, this is a multiverse scenario. It's also typically understood spiritually that your oversoul or higher self, the part of you that remains with God's light, could be running multiple versions of yourself and alternate identities in history, present, past, and future simultaneously. Now, this feeds into the concept of channeling future outcomes. A future outcome is only the most likely course and action based on all the current variables, with all the contracted people staying the same, including your perception of yourself. So, due to the changing of variables, making choice A versus choice B, as well as the vibrations and actions of the people that you have contracted with throughout these experiences, predictions can only ever be most likely outcomes. Now, when dealing on a grander scale predictions, one can only make those predictions based on the most likely scenario. Essentially, it's an extrasensory probability predictor. All of this to say that a psychic is really any human who is willing enough to trust their own connection to the divine within. And in the realm of the ability to perceive possible paths forward, it can only be used as a guide for what is up ahead under the current circumstances. Precognition of any form is usually intended as a guidance tool to get you, or on a larger scale, humanity, on the right path. So when someone taps into the reality that they are a part of, there will be some predictions that come true and others that, due to different decisions being made, won't. And that doesn't even take into account the fact that reality requires your participation. It requires your perception. And there are even theories out there that we might not even all exist on the exact same reality either. Because reality heavily relies on perception, and perception is something that easily defines your reality. The same way that the double slit experiment in particle physics proves that there are no definite states of existence until it is observed. Much like the cat is neither alive nor dead in Schrodinger's experiment with the cat, a particle is neither a particle nor a wave until there's someone to observe it. So essentially, the future is not so cut and dry, but our human bodies are equipped to use the additional senses to receive divine guidance to lead us to what is called our highest timeline. Now, that said, not everybody retains these abilities past childhood, and because either they don't know how to regain it, or don't believe that they can, or don't believe that they should, based on theories, beliefs, religions, some have turned to psychics. Now, unlike what the CIA believes, it can be taught and reopened in individuals who have faith that they can and want to learn. But there are people who believe that these are just special skills that they could never have. And for those people who are able to tap into those skills naturally, or even via hypnosis like Dolores Cannon's work, they have two options on how to wield those skills. Clair skills give you the ability to tap into near or distant timeline events, or make contact across dimensions, which I guess dimensions are often referred to as spirit realms. It can be done with or without tools, And it could be used to inform of an event, stop an event, or make something happen that shouldn't by seeing an event and changing the variables, therefore changing the outcomes. Now, gifts like telekinesis, telepathy, and remote viewing, as well as forms of energy manipulation, can be really useful for safety, security, and supporting a sense of oneness. It could also be used to spy on individuals or mess with their reality. Developing manifestation techniques and states of being can literally change your reality and the timeline that you're on. But you could use those techniques to manifest negative things, which clearly is not the highest vibrational divine intention of the gifts. Developing and healing and energy healing could literally save lives or humanity and put a big dent in big pharma. But it could also give you the power of life or death over people. Many of these things were uncovered in the decades and documents within the Gateway program, and then later branching into the Stargate and other attached programs. And of course, intelligence agencies and governments have used these findings in various ways that are known and unknown to the general population and people across the world. But these are not the first time that humans have known these things. If you go back in the furthest reaches of cultural history, you'll find the wise woman, the shaman, the miracle workers, the oracles, the deities in human form. It was once freely shared within cultures. Just look at indigenous people. Once we started congregating in large groups, building cities, and shifting power to either a single person or a body of people, humankind moved further and further away from using these natural skills themselves. Royalty and religious leaders, politicians, and the super unimaginably wealthy further and further helped to bury these abilities and so many more. Yes, when you see humans congregate, our manifestations are amplified with collective energy. But Jesus tells you all you need is faith. But the leaders of civilizations have told you you need them. You need their deities, you need their practices, you need their rituals, you need those things. Not you can use those things, but you need those things to reach God, through to God. But Jesus said, all you need is faith. When the woman who touched his cloak was healed, he said it was her faith that healed her. Jesus told the disciples who were confused as to why they couldn't work a miracle or cast out a demon, he told them that it could not happen because they had so little faith. Only breaths later, he tells people that with faith the size of a mustard seed, that they could move mountains and would do greater things than he. It was Jesus that accused the governmental leaders and religious leaders of theft, hypocrisy, and essentially told you that you did not need them to access the divine. He compared them to whitewashed tombs. He called them and those who could not see it the dead. The more that certain people were elevated over the rest of humanity, the more they created conditions that made it difficult for people to access these gifts. Responsibility, debt, war, negativity, noise, distractions, and technology have all helped to put humanity in a vibration or resonation that makes it difficult to access these higher abilities. And as time marched on, those accessing their power became more and more suppressed. First, through power struggles and class definitions, and secondly, by later condemning them publicly, presenting them as evil or demonic, all while accessing them themselves behind the scenes. And the knowledge moved underground, kept by two types of groups. One type was keeping it for the sake of preservation, and the other for the sake of hoarding it and holding it from others. These circumstances, this split between light and dark, has been one of the prophecies foretold throughout human history. You see, it's impossible to predict the future with 100% accuracy. However, there are some universal inevitabilities, like a reawakening of the masses, which is simply unavoidable. Some outcomes are inevitable, and it's only whether you take, or you as a humanity take the easier path or the harder path to get to that outcome. Which circles me back to the GATE program, a program across schools in America, and who knows, maybe in countries other than America too. Programs that targeted a certain range of ages at a certain time in history, targeting a group who today are established as adults, becoming leaders, and who will be for the next 20 to 40 years. Consisting of worksheets and recordings and puzzles and intuitive exercises, displays of logic and sight and imagination and hearing and so many other aspects. The GATE program remains a vague memory for the majority of its participants. Often, memories are unlocked through sharing glimpses of memories with each other. The interconnected nature of the internet has helped to resurface a lot of that naturally. It's almost as if it was intended to stay dormant until a moment where people could share instantaneously and across distance. So this leads me to the ultimate question, probably often asked, but maybe not in this way. What was seen all those years ago in the Gateway program and later Stargate program that launched ongoing experiments, research, and gave birth to projects both known and not yet revealed? What was observed where the prioritization shifted from building people with these gifts to identifying the younger generations who already had access or were able, with prompting, to regain access to these gifts? Well, I don't have an exact answer. However, I can say that it was for the betterment of humanity and for a time in the not too distant future, if only to spark the teaching of the generations that are to come next. Although I suspect there is something a lot bigger and potentially more imminent on the horizon. It does seem like, with recently exposed documents, that children with gifts or innate abilities were not only of interest to the intelligence community, but also to those elite who were looking for new ways to harvest that light. So the question inevitably is, what is on the horizon that has been seen that humanity may need to stand up for? And will we know that moment when it comes? I'll leave that for you to think about. I know my answer. Join me next week while we discuss fasting. I've touched briefly on fasting, but We have an amazing phenomena happening right now around the world, and I'd like to celebrate fasting. So we will do that next Sunday. See you then.